Hello and welcome to a very special episode of The Dive. This is season 4, episode 36. We are live. I'm pretty sure I woke up Travis with that one. We are live today.
Excellent job. You did it perfectly then.
Off of the heels of the World's Draw Show. If you missed our live show, or if you missed this live show, remember that you can always catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and many other major podcast platforms.
You turned this into some ASMR, Kobe?
Yeah.
Let's set our viewers up with a look. Freak had an explainer that we played earlier about the format, and we can just play it as a quick refresher here for the format for our listeners at home and our viewers.
The 2020 League of Legends World Championship is coming to Shanghai, China, and we're here to take a closer look at this year's tournament's format. The month-long event will narrow down 22 teams through 3 stages of competition: play-ins, group stage, and knockout stage. Worlds will begin in the play-in stage, where the top teams from Brazil's CBLOL, Japan's LJL, Oceania's OPL, the Commonwealth of Independent States LCL, Latin America's LLA, and Turkey's TCL will be joined by lower-seeded teams from Southeast Asia's PCS, North America's LCS, China's LPL, and Europe's LEC. Play-in teams will be sorted into 2 groups of 5, and each team will play 1 game against every other team in their group. Teams finishing 5th in their group will be eliminated, while the teams finishing 3rd and 4th will get 1 last shot to progress in the event by facing each other in a best-of-5 series. Those victors will earn the right to move on and play the team who finished 2nd in the opposite group in another best-of-5 series. The winner of that match, alongside the first-place teams from the round robins, will move on to the group stage. For those following along with the math, the group stage will consist of 16 teams. The 4 teams advancing from the play-in stage and 12 teams who qualified directly into the group stage. They are the top 3 seeded teams from China's LPL, Europe's LEC, and Korea's LCK, the top 2 seeded teams from North America's LCS, and the number 1 seed from Southeast Asia's PCS. In the group stage, the 16 teams will be split into 4 groups, where each group will play a best-of-1 double round robin. The competition here will be fierce, and only the top 2 teams from each group will make it through to the knockout stage. Knockouts will see the remaining 8 teams fight through a single elimination bracket consisting of best-of-5 matches. The tournament will conclude with the World Championship Final, where the 2 top teams will play a single best-of-5 series. The winner will become the 10th team to raise the Summoners Cup and the 2020 League of Legends World Champions.
There you have it. Quick refresher from our boy Freak.
Thank you, Freak. What a homeboy.
Yeah, I think it should be pretty interesting this year. I like the play-in format. You know, it's 2 bigger groups, and only 2 teams are going to be eliminated after the original round robin. So we're going to see more teams having the opportunity to actually, prove themselves in a best-of series, which I think is great because these teams have been battling all year long to get here. And I don't want to see teams just going out in best-of-1. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I think it's going to give opportunities for some of these other regions to showcase their talents and really kind of compare themselves against the best regions, against some of these really tough teams that are going to be in play-in.
And I also think with the format how it is, the only being single round robin, each match will be super, super important, which is really fun and also really scary, as a North American fan. If let's say Mad Lions is better, or you lose to them 1 game, then you get upset once, suddenly you're potentially in that 3rd, 4th seed, which has to play 2 series, and it actually becomes a pretty hard road very quickly based off if you get upset once potentially, and the other team's able to pick up a lot of wins.
Yeah, but at the same time, you get those series, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
At the end of the day, if you aren't 5th, and if you get 5th, you just don't deserve to move on. And as long as you're in the top 4, you're going to have best of series, right? And then if TL or whoever, if LGD or Mad Lions or any of those big teams were to lose in the best of series, then that's fair to me. That makes sense that you then don't move on, right? So I do like the format card a lot. I think it's going to be exciting. And I think that, as far as the North American perspective is concerned, Team Liquid, got a pretty good group.
Yeah. So for me, I like that this format keeps the anticipation and the kind of the adrenaline going the entire way with the tiered system. Initially, only the first place team gets to breathe their sigh of relief. And then we're looking at, okay, so only one of Team Liquid or Mad Lions gets to initially be calm and have their relief. Then you know that 3 and 4 play each other, and they're going to have to play the second seed from the other team. So whichever one of them gets second could possibly, have to play like Unicorns of Love or something, which is a very scary opponent coming from the other side. So you really don't get to rest, and it adds more excitement to the entire duration of the play-in stage, at least for me. And that, I would say, Group A probably sweating a bit more than Group B, as far as the teams that don't place first, possibly having that difficult competition in the cross group play. On the other side, though, I think everybody's going to say, yeah, LGD is probably going to place first, and then it's going to be up to the rest of them to try and battle for that possible next best of 5 to get through.
Yeah, and for some historical context, I think only once, if I'm not mistaken, has, kind of the Pool 1 teams not made it out, and that was back in 2017 with HKA getting upset in the group, and then, it was 1907 Fenerbahce taking first place. It led to this whole situation. Funny story, Unified and Kaiwing were the bot lane for HKA when that happened. So I'm looking at PSG talent a little bit, and I'm like, Unicorns of Love looks pretty dope. Yeah, I think that you might have that upset. To your point, then it's the teams in Group A that are going to have to deal with Unicorns of Love potentially. But I think it's still scary for PSG or whoever else in Group B, because then you're playing either Team Liquid or Mad most likely to try and break into the main stage.
I honestly think the Unicorns of Love are favored above PSG, right? Like, I actually think that they are the number 2 team in that group. You talked about the fact that only once has a major region team, an LS team, got upset, and that's the only time that has ever really happened in play-in. But this team has been incredibly close to doing it. Essentially for 3 tournaments in a row, they've actually been very close. They went 2-3 against Splice for Worlds in 2019. For Worlds in 2018, they went 2-3 against C9 when they were Gambit previously. So this kind of roster, like this core of the team, has played in a number of those. They've been close a number of times. They were 2-3 against Fengvu Buffalo at MSI in 2019. So these guys have been right on the precipice of actually making it through play-in a number of times. They just seem to be getting even stronger in the LCL. They have been incredibly dominant. I think of the teams outside the major regions, they are the ones really to watch for. I mean, they lost 1 game, including playoffs, in their entire summer split, right? And that was in the finals. That was the only one they lost. And even more insane than that is they actually only gave up 1 Baron the entire split, and that was also in the 1 game that they lost. So they had 95% Baron control or something like that. So this team has been incredibly dominant. They're speedrunning games. They had a 17-minute win, and I think that they really want to be able to have that breakthrough performance and get through to the group stage.
Yeah, I think it'd especially be pretty scary if Team Liquid had to play them, because I think Ananasek is situated really well to try and take advantage. If Team Liquid don't adapt during these months of practice for trying to change their style, if they do come in with a slower style, Unicorns of Love have been so quick, they'll definitely attack them there, and they'll definitely attack them in the jungle too. So definitely, I'm excited already for the play-ins group stage to play all the way through. Like I said, I think there's multiple cliffhanger points with the format, and waiting to see who is going to play the cross group matches.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have anyone else on Group B you want to hit, but for Group A, I'm definitely looking at Supermassive, just based off a lot of name power, as someone that you're like, oh crap, it's Kakao, and even Bolulu, Zeitnot, Snowflower, all these guys you've seen a bunch of times at international competition. Supermassive feels like they're always representing, and so I think that they are a bit of probably the dark horse to when I was talking about one of those teams that you have to be worried about upsetting you if you're Mad or TL and getting forced down. That's probably the team for me that I have my eye on the most.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm looking as well. It feels like a tough group probably for INTZ as well as Legacy Esports. They're definitely going to be the underdogs. I think they're kind of the expected teams to be fighting to avoid that 5th spot to try to break into the best of 5. But I am really excited for the NAEU matchup for Team Liquid and Mad Lions. Both these teams I think had really strong trajectories starting out and then tapered off a bit. Obviously for Team Liquid, it wasn't during the regular season. It was more towards playoffs where they did feel like they kind of somewhat got figured out. And we'll see if they can adapt and change their strategies, if they can be able to mix things up a little bit going up against Mad Lions, who also, starting out in the LEC was in the regular season looking like one of the best teams in the league. Fnatic and G2 weren't playing as well. Mad alongside Rogue were these teams that kind of were springing up towards the top and really having these breakout performances. And that did start to cool off, towards the later end of the split and in playoffs. But they're a team with a lot of promising young players, like a lot of kind of their rookie team, so to speak. Shadow is a guy who's got an incredible amount of hype, especially for his Lee Sin. So I think that's going to be a pretty exciting matchup.
Yeah. And talking about, I feel like this match, if we're just talking about this matchup, because that's going to be the premier one, of course, all the fans are going to be rooting on both sides, Simpson gif or whatever, and knives out, circling them around, see who's going to be able to get.
Wait, you saying they're the monkeys, Kobe?
No, you said
the
it.
Simpsons gif.
I just referenced it. I didn't say it.
I think a lot of this is going to hinge on is Shadow going to be able to pull off these aggressive plays, or can Team Liquid punish him for it? Because Rogue defeated them really well by punishing Shadow. They killed him on invades. Inspired was quick to punish him. Whenever he did one of his aggressive jungle paths, leaving up a quadrant of his jungle, trying to make a play on the other side of the map, Inspired would punish him after he fails his play. They also had several of them where they would catch Shadow inside their own jungle. So if Team Liquid's able to pull off that and try and replicate that style that was shown in playoffs in the LEC, then I think that they could be able to take it. But I was actually super hyped for Mad Lions for their bottom lane, because these are two rookies where my eyes were popping out like, oh my God, really? Like, how did these guys actually just go through as rookies this entire time? Karzi and Kaiser from the beginning of the split just had so many highlight plays, and I found myself rooting for them because I always like rookies and underdogs and stuff, and them jumping to the top of the LEC at the beginning was such a hype story for me. So I think their bottom side of the map plus their jungle is gonna be a big determining factor for me. Humanoid, I'm a little bit iffy on now with the recent play, but he has shown very high highs as well as some of the more down games. So I think that matchup is going to be super interesting. As far as a super massive one, I definitely agree. I mean, TCL, nothing to scoff at, and Supermassive have represented them the most of all the TCL teams. And the only thing is, to me, they also play a weak side top, and they play like the kind of more risk averse weak side top. So it'll come down to like who plays it better if they play Team Liquid. And I feel like Impact should have an advantage over Armut.
Yeah, I was going to say, in general, for if you're a Team Liquid fan looking at this group, like, I don't think you have to be too concerned about some of those problems that cropped up. I think Shadow, as we've already talked about, is potentially one where MarkZ, can he do what Inspired did? I mean, based off recent showing, most likely not. But you still have, a great bot lane with Tactical and Core JJ that should match up very well with Kaiser. And then, like you said, topside, like, Arome's good, but it doesn't feel like the focal point for them, and Impact's pretty resilient. So I think, I was really concerned when I was looking at some of this stuff for Team Liquid and NA in general about like how fast they play and their topside carry potential and these kinds of things. But I don't think that this is necessarily the group right now in play-ins that would expose those kinds of problems.
Yeah, honestly, I had zero concerns for TL no matter what the play-in group draw was. And maybe that's overconfident, but I think that TL showed how good they were in best of ones in the regular season. I think that this is a team that it's like, while you expect that slower style to be punished against some of the really fast, like top elite teams, right? Like, you expect that to maybe be really difficult if things go to chalk and they get into the G2 G2 Suning group, teams that are going to play fast, are going to challenge them, force them to react constantly. That can be difficult. But historically, what we've seen is that the teams that play those slow macro styles from the major regions have done really, really well against, some of these other teams from the smaller regions. And I think that TL, has the individual skill, has the wherewithal to be able to play this out, and be pretty comfortable in this group.
You're saying comfortable. Does that mean you're predicting TL number 1 over Mad Lions? Is that what I?
Mark, I'm glad that he gave us the perfect clippable. He gave us the perfect clippable to be memed for the I'm not concerned at all.
That's
type of moment.
When he said that, that's all I heard.
That's all we need. Yeah, stop listening after that.
With this format, I'm not concerned at all. And you can quote me on that. I mean, if they don't get out, then I think they are really underperforming. I think that this format, if anything, is in their favor, right? You should have to lose in a best of. I just can't see it happening. I think that LGD is a huge threat. I think that Mad Lions is a huge threat. But I would be shocked if LGD does not get first in their group and Mad Lions is on their side. So that's not who they would have to play in a best of anyway. Unicorns of Love is also likely to get second. So even if you're not first, it's unlikely you would play them. I think their chances are really good.
All right.
So we kind of talked about the likelihood of who's getting out here, and I don't know how speculative we want to get on where they end up in groups before we cover them, but it's actually if things go roughly the chalk, pretty set. I don't know if you've talked about or you looked at that at all. But
I think the highest chances are Team Liquid, if we're assuming major regions all get out.
Yeah.
Team Liquid would get A, PSG would get B, C would be LGD, and D would be MAD.
And even if that,
because that doesn't overlap any.
Right. Even if that upset happens, that Azael was talking about with
it would still be UOL
PSG,
and B.
Yeah. The emerging region team would still go into Group B. So because of how many EU and LPL teams there are, it is pretty locked into what group people are probably going to end up in. So I thought that was really interesting that already you can kind of be okay, TL's going here. These teams are most likely going here, and I think it does make pretty balanced groups overall.
It does. I mean, every group is going to be really hard.
Except for B, I don't know how you could ever call B balanced. If you're balanced, oh yeah,
what do you mean?
Dom 1 and JD are out. It's balanced.
There's your finals right there. It's your B
B
finals.
for balanced, actually. That's Mark's take. B is not group of death. It's B for balanced.
I mean, B is for sure the brutal group. You feel bad for Rogue, for getting put in there because both JDG and Damwon are world championship contenders. Either of these teams could win the entire tournament, and I wouldn't be surprised. You have JDG, who was incredibly tight with top both in spring and in summer. These two teams are very comparable. LPL has been the most dominant region by a lot, and both of those teams are absolutely elite level in the LPL. Damwon was the best LCK team by far, so whoever gets put with them, it's okay. Sorry, bro.
Hear me out though, because I think group of death to me is not just 1-2 are locked, but also a 3 that should probably have gotten out, or that one team's kind of going to get snubbed or whatever you want to call it, or screwed, they're not going to be able to get out. As good as I think Rogue can be, I don't think that they're seriously contending with Group B, and even maybe we're talking about finals or best of 5 upset
then who would
win.
You say Group C or something, assuming LGD joins? Because that seems like maybe the most competitive, interesting group to me.
Right. That's potentially what I'm looking at. Because like I said, I don't want to snub Rogue at all, but they're not, I think, expected to do great. And if they got out of a group, it would be a pretty good success for them. So that's why I think it's not quite like we've seen in the past, where it's EU number 1 seed, LPL number 2 seed, which is also great, and then LCK number 3 seed, which is also great. It's not quite that group.
I just feel so bad for Rogue because I know even during the regular split when they were winning so much, people were not really giving them a lot of credit.
Yeah.
And they're like, come on, give us credit. And then And I was like, yeah, you know what? I really feel like Inspired is really being slept on. And then he started playing carries in playoffs and stuff. And you're like, oh, yeah, they're also changing and adapting here. And Larson's playing a bunch of Akali, and he played the Lucian mid. They adapted to what beat them. And then you're like, oh, yeah. And then they lose the G2, and then they get put in this group. And you're like, when are they going to get their credit? When are they going to get this is definitely a rough one.
It's a rough group, dude.
It is really hard. I mean, they bounced back at least, right? Like, well, because Rogue played Fnatic in the first round and got 3-0'd, and then everyone's like, "We knew it, they're frauds,"
Yeah,
like I knew it the whole time. I never doubted it. But then they beat Mad Lions.
Exactly.
They played close
5
against
games.
G2.
Yeah.
So I think they acquitted themselves well in the rest of playoffs, and they proved that they do deserve to be here, that they can be competitive. If you want to look for that glimmer of hope for Rogue, it is that they were very strong in best of ones in the regular season. They were first place in the regular season in LEC, so that's something that is obviously working a little bit in their favor. As we know, the round robin is huge, right? Best of ones. If you can prepare for specific strategies for these teams, maybe you can make some sort of an upset happen. But it is going to be really an incredibly hard group, I think, for Rogue overall.
Yeah. And just the final point on them, I just wanted to add, it was also the way that they then bounced back from their losses to Fnatic, where they used the Lucian mid and they used the Evelynn, and I was like, see, they can adapt too. That's always a promising thing to look for Worlds, since of course, we are going to be moving to the Worlds patch 3.19, or 10.19, so things are going to change again for all of these teams, but. Let's move on to a different group. Group B, I think we've definitely hit.
Yeah, let's talk Group A a bit, and we can kind of go over some of these teams. I mean, we can talk specifically about some of the Group B stuff after, but Group A, I think it's going to be interesting. This is the group that people are kind of somewhat looking at as like the group of life or the easiest group. I don't think it's
TL's in there too.
Yeah, we can assume TL is in there. I think that both G2 and Suning are heavy favorites in this group. Machi was honestly the team that everyone is hoping to draw. From the initial 12 that were going to be in this. This is the team that you're kind of hoping to go up against. They have a lot of players that have Worlds experience. Kobe and I were watching some of their games. All 5 of their players have been to Worlds before. They have a level of international experience. But I do think that going up against the likes of G2 and Suning, you're pretty heavily outclassed. Suning, I think, is a threat to just win this group. It's historically LEC has struggled against the LPL. That's not really a secret. Not even just like all the G2 kind of memes. But it's something like a 33% win rate or thereabouts for LEC against LPL historically. So it is very heavily LPL favored. I definitely think G2 can win this group, but Suning is a strong team, and I think people can't really overlook them. Though they're playing with Sword Art, who I think is going to be one of the most recognizable names on that team. He obviously has played internationally a lot. SOSFM is a name that I think a lot of guys will also know. Coming over from the VCS, he has been one of the best junglers in all of the LPL, and he plays a really unique style that Kobe was referencing earlier in the group draw. Like he's this guy who has really been big about tank Lee Sin. He'll rush Night's Vow, he'll go Spirit Visage, Thornmail, where in a lot of the other regions it's almost always just like Clockwork, Warrior, Black Cleaver, Death Dance, GA, like these types of items. He plays a different style, and he's very, very effective doing it. So it's kind of interesting. I think that overall they're quite strong. Bot lane is solid. I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation. I think it's Huangfeng.
When I listened to the LPL casters during the VODs, they were saying Huangfeng.
Okay, yeah. So I think him and Sorter are a strong lane. I think if there's a weakness on the team, it's probably the soul laners. Bin didn't really impress me a ton, but also to be fair, it was like Bin didn't impress me a ton when I was watching LPL throughout the season when he was going up against the Shy and Zoom and 369.
I was about to say.
So some of the absolute elite top laners in the entire world. So it may be a bit of a different story here for him. I don't think that like Machi and TL are going to be able to play in the same way that some of those top lane focused teams in the LPL can.
Yeah,
right. Because Ben still is often getting a lot of counterpick, a lot of carries. So looking at the matchups that you're saying in the top lane potentially, that is still a concern. for Team Liquid if they slot in there. I think Wonder I think I'll be really excited to see those two go up against each other, because Wonder at Worlds historically he kind of like ramps up. He's a lot of players on G2 are kind of like that, where when it really starts to matter, suddenly they're playing a lot better. And Wonder has been fantastic at Worlds a number of times, and so I'm really excited to see him go up against Bin. But then also I think like the whole matchup between Suning and G2 is super interesting, just because SOFM, and Yankos are pretty different. I don't know if that's an understatement. They definitely have some different approaches to jungling, but I think the solo laners, like you're saying, being G2's strength and maybe a little bit of your concern for Suning, does make it really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for G2, I think the question is always like, how much stock do you put in some of the regular season struggles? Because this is a team that I think historically has had that happen a lot of times, where it's like, oh, they're looking a little bit weak in the regular season, but they still won though, right? And they always seem to turn it on in playoffs. It's kind of the same deal with them and Fnatic. This regular season, they did show a lot of holes, I think, in their gameplay. Specifically, their bot lane was getting a lot of criticism about how they were playing. Obviously, to be fair, they swapped roles in spring, they swapped back in summer, so there's an adjustment period there, changing things around like that. But at the end of the day, they still won. They seem to be able to turn it on when it matters most. I expect G2 to have a really strong performance at Worlds. I think that they are alongside, I would say, JDG, Top, Damwon. Those are my top four. Those would be my, my kind of title contenders in that sort of bracket. So I do expect that G2 is favorite. I do expect that they should win this group if they can play to their level. Yeah. But Suning, I think, has the ability to upset, has the ability, if they're playing at their best, to maybe come out on top. But like you're saying, G2's solo lanes are really, really strong. I expect Caps to have his way with Angel. I think that, he's going to be, winning a lot of those lanes.
It's actually funny too. The first things I was thinking of for this Worlds group is there aren't a ton of huge changes on the 10-19 Worlds patch, because they try and keep them really small for this goes to Worlds. But one of the biggest ones to me was the big nerf to AD carry Senna. And you're talking about G2's bottom lane slump, and Perkz has been so vocal. He's just like, does not like AD carry Senna at all. He's like, I need to play carry champions. I'm fine. If this champion is good, I will play it. He's like, okay, I will play it, but I'm not going to like it. And it's getting a big nerf. And this is just after, a lot of the LCS teams, I felt like, had really started to finally warm up to Senna and had started to finally embrace it. I mean, it's embodied by Doublelift, but the other LCS AD carries as well. So it takes that down a decent priority. I think that's a good thing for G2 if other teams' options of playing supportive bottom lanes down there are taken down a notch. The other thing I'm looking at, I've been sifting through the notes from the VODs we watched, and I have a screenshot from my favorite Suning game was the one that we were watching, Azael, where Suning set up the classic Lilia Raptor invade. So it is nothing special. Almost 80% of teams.
LPL with
80% of teams do that. But what Suning did is they just jacked it up to like 11 here. So they invade Raptors with the Lilia. Their bottom lane comes in. They keep Bin down here. So it's a 5-person invade.
Oh, yeah,
they hide Bin until later. And so SOFM is doing Raptors. Lilia annihilates Raptors. So he annihilates those while the rest of the team is fighting Peanut and LGD off of the red. They then chunk down the red. So as soon as SOFM finishes Raptors, he walks over, picks up the 10 health red free on his way. Didn't even have to waste any time doing it. Then goes right down to Krugs and is level 3 full red side steal away from LGD from Peanut. And Peanut has to go back to base because his team chunks him out. And then Bin just teleports back top. He's like, fine, I'll play top with no teleport. Whatever. We got our jungler basically a 3-minute advantage. This is like if you load into a solo queue game and the enemy jungler is AFK for 2.5 minutes. That's what happened in this game because of their level 1 invade where they send Peanuts back to the fountain. SOFM is level 3 red buff Lilia ganking bottom lane, and you're just like, how do you come back from that type of stuff? So some of the level ones, some of the setup here for them, I just love how they will all in on these strategies.
I'll tell you how they come back. You watch some of their mid games. It's like
Yeah.
that Suning LGD series was like, whoa, this is okay. So like G2,
they 6-0'd him basically.
I mean they beat him up, but some of those just like constant fighting mid lane fights over nothing. I was like, all right. And I think G2 is actually really smart. When I was watching their games, I was pretty impressed with their ability to make side lane plays in the windows where there's no major objectives to fight over. I actually thought that was one of the most impressive things when I was watching them play. And I think that they'll have a macro advantage most likely over Suning. As well as, like we were saying, with some of the solo lane stuff. And the only other thing I'll say that I wanted to chime in a second ago was about some of the bot lane struggles that G2 is having. They still had them in playoffs. They actually got solo killed a number of times in different bot lanes.
It's definitely the most questionable part of the team.
Right. And the interesting thing when you start talking about the Senna nerfs as well was China and LPL didn't really love Senna to begin with. They were already still kind of more on the Ezreal train as probably being higher priority anyways. So they actually might be, funnily enough, a step ahead, coming in from what they were playing regionally to what the meta ends up being. So it could be good for perks, but I also think the bot lane meta looks like it is suiting China's style a little bit more already.
The nerf I'm talking about, by the way, is they're dropping the chance of minions and lesser soul drops for AD carry to be dropped down basically by half, from 8.33 to 4.16.
Yeah, so that is a big deal. And to your point, Mark, Hongfeng only played 3 Senna games, all split. So not a lot there. Should be an interesting group. TL, I think we'll probably talk more about their chances in the group, assuming they get to play in later on. But I do think that of these 3, Machi is definitely the heavy underdog. In this, there are some names that I think people will recognize. It is PK, Gemini, Mission, Bruce, Koala. A lot of these guys, like I said, have actually played together on previous teams. They've all been to Worlds at one time or another. So I do think that they have a tremendous amount of experience as far as that goes. But I'm not convinced, that they're going to be able to match up to some of these teams, especially you're going up against G2 and Suning, who do have the ability to get really, really aggressive. And something that, we saw when we were watching their series, Kobe, was how Gemini, his jungle pathing was really, really predictable, right? Where he was doing some of these pretty atypical paths where he was doing like full
Heavy
6 camp clears on Lee Sin and things like this, right? And so even in their finals, he would be getting invaded at his red at this super late timing, but because he did a 3 camp clear on the blue side as Lee Sin, the jungler was still able to do like buff, and then meet him at his buff and still steal that buff too. And just like he was doing these really kind of slow, heavy farming styles where he was often getting abused and kind of having that pathing and those tendencies really taken advantage of. And now I don't know if that's something that he always is reliant on, or if this was something specifically kind of prepared for that series, but it did feel like he was a liability at times, and going up against SOFM and Yankos, who are 2 of the best junglers, in the world, honestly. These guys are top junglers in their region. I do think he's going to have an incredibly hard time. And because both of these teams are also, pretty heavily playing around their jungle and allowing their jungler to dictate the pace of the game, like that doesn't bode well for a team that I think, may struggle in that area. Group B, you want to talk a little bit about Damwon and and JDG?
Who wants to talk about them? That we want to talk about the good teams, not these not these stinkers. I think starting with Damwon, they're so good. Their top side is absolutely incredible. Probably best top side in the world, but that's the whole point to see. But just
top though.
Top E's was hella good. I think especially, it's not in this matchup, but the top lane, seeing what's going on between 369 and Naguri will be a large part of what people are interested in. But Canyon has improved since last year, and people already knew him. Showmaker as well is absolutely incredible. Him and Chovy were both popping off in LCK, and then Ghost kind of plays like the role player. He's often getting left alone for Beryl to go run around the map and make plays, and they're just so dominant. They lane Kingdom top side of the map, and then Beryl is able to help try and snowball, and they're just such a solid team all around. And even Ghost is like when they do want to play around him, still pretty good. They just choose not to most of the time. But they did that. They swapped it up in game 1 of their finals where they went this like tank top, I think it was Kate Luck's bot lane. And you're like, oh crap, what the hell? They're just, okay, I guess the Ghost will be the main carry this time.
Solid is an interesting word to use because everyone talking about this team is always like, yeah, it's actually so up and down for DRX. Their drafts have been kind of all over the place for themselves. Some of the performances from individual players. And when I was talking to Atlas too, he was like, yeah, honestly feel even a little bit like more confident in Gen G because of the consistency than DRX, even though they got the higher seed. Oh, we're talking about Damwon right now. All my notes are mixed up. Okay, save my DRX stuff for later.
Yeah,
Damwon,
I was about to agree with you hard about what the points you made about DRX, but Damwon, I'm like, what?
Yeah. No, Damwon's super hyped up, especially because the Damwon scrim mythos is also alive and well again. From last Worlds, it was a super big deal, but already we had like top esports being like, oh yeah, we're already getting slammed by Damwon and scrims. These guys are just nutty. It's crazy once again. So for me, I'm still always looking with this team. There's such high expectations now, especially because they smashed LCK so much. Mm-hmm. For them to show it and perform it within Worlds. So in this group, their games versus JDG are going to be super hype. These two going against each other in the group stage should be like a giant preview for people for a lot of what the top of the tournament is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, they looked, to me, they looked by far the best out of any LCK team. I think that LCK as a whole looked weaker this year compared to some of the previous years, but I think Damwon looked a step above of everyone else. They look so incredibly dominant. They are super, super impressive. For their 5 players, I think only Ghost wasn't actually first team All-Pro.
Ruler, so
baby. Ruler. I mean, that's hard to beat. What can you say? It's Ruler. But they are so solid. You talked about Canyon. I think Canyon is one of the best junglers in the world for sure. Up there for me. Alongside Kanavi, who I think is absolutely incredible. These are maybe the 2 best junglers in the tournament. I think that is arguable at the very least. So I think that is going to be incredibly exciting to see these two matching up. And, it's going to be really, really interesting seeing Nuguri go up against Zoom. Nuguri was so hyped up, in the previous Worlds, talking about the Scrim God stuff, but there was also like, he just he was going call and he was doing klepto when auto attacks, give you gold. And he was doing like these ultra greedy builds and everyone was getting so excited because, people were talking about it. And this guy would go into solo queue on Vladimir, start a call, and then like buy a coin, and he's going klepto, and everyone's like, it doesn't matter, bro, you can't punish him, he's just unstoppable, he beats you in lane with all the greediest setup, and then he has 6 death caps at 5 minutes. It's just like there's this kind of aura of invincibility around him. He didn't really end up playing to the level I think that people were expecting, to the level of the hype his last time out to Worlds, and he is going to be going up against Zoom, who I think is a monster. Zoom, arguably the best top laner in the LPL, up there with 369 and the Shy. The Shy did get first team All-Pro, but I think a lot of people felt that was kind of like fraudulent based on some of his bad performances. But this is going to be, I think, such an exciting group because both of these teams, there are such high expectations. For the LCK, they obviously were the most dominant region for so long, and LPL is very clearly taking that crown. LCK is maybe the 3rd best now, based on the results. At least they are the 3rd best. So they want to have a really good showing here from their number 1 seed. This is their best team. They're expected to do incredibly well. They want to see them be able to take down JDG, but I think it's going to be so difficult. Like Lumao, I think this guy is like the prototypical support. This is everything you want out of your support player these days. He has just the most amazing Bard. This guy is incredibly aggressive. His roam
Bard,
timings,
Leona, Thresh,
set
throw the Pantheon in there.
Like he is just everywhere. And I think that LPL supports are just like super smurfs. These guys are insane. Like they play so aggressively in lane, and they are able to manipulate waves in such a way that they are always getting the most out of the pressure that they have. If they are ever ahead, they're always threatening a dive or holding a hard freeze so you can't approach. If they have a roam timing, they're punishing your mid lane. They're invading for vision. They're tracking your jungler. Like they're doing it all. And I think this guy exemplifies that the best out of many and maybe anyone at the tournament.
Right, and I think that's you're talking about, Kanavi versus Canyon. I'm also really excited to see Lumao versus Beryl for that reason, because I think Beryl's really good about roaming as well. I mean, in the LPL, you see supports down 2 levels from their AD carries like all the time because they're roaming so much, and I think that's why you saw a little bit more
get
priority
experience from kills, Mark.
Yeah, they're like, you know what? Do we need champs who can stay alone by themselves for long periods of time? AD carries are often just down there CSing it up while their stuff's going around the map, and so I think seeing Beryl versus Lumao will be one of the highlights for me in that matchup. But they do match up super well. Like you already talked about Zoom Naguri, then you have Canyon Kanavi. Like it's just like so many positions where these are people contending for best in the world, and it's already happening in group stage, which is so hype. And that's also why when you got to feel bad for Rogue, to get thrust in the middle of these like Clash of Titans kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, and I feel really bad, honestly, for Finn. Because Finn is not going to have a good time with these 2 top laners. Finn was not having a good time in the LEC.
Yeah, I was going to say already.
Finn is usually somewhere over by himself in a side lane, getting
he gets
beat
the
down.
NA top treatment. For
yeah,
sure.
He's definitely getting the like leave him on an island, don't help him ever, and he's not doing that well. So Finn had a tough time, I think, in the LEC. He was someone that was definitely exploited. I felt like in playoffs in a lot of their games and a lot of their losses. And these are 2 teams that can absolutely run you over through top lane. So I think that is going to be incredibly frightening. I think that is the biggest mismatch as far as roles go for Rogue, and I think that they are going to have to figure out how they want to try to remedy that. If they want to have any sort of chance in this group, it has to be a strategy to play around that. Are you going to either just like fully abandon ship and just pray that Finn can hold up and all in on other lanes? Are you going to actually try to play towards Finn and protect him somewhat? But I think it's very difficult to go either way, because I just don't think Finn can match up player for player with Nuguri or Zoom, and I think that if you just leave him alone completely, he's going to get run over by Canyon and Kanavi too, because these guys are 2 of the best top laners in the entire tournament, paired with 2 of the best junglers in the entire tournament who know how to snowball that lane.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at the jungles and mid lane too. I'm actually pretty excited for Larson. And him to get to show, against Showmaker is always, everybody always wants to play the best and show up there. So I think that he has been one, especially with the kind of evolution that he showed where, as I mentioned, the Lucian before, but then he spammed Akali. He's been playing, a lot of different looks. We already know he can play the Azir, the Orianna, control mages really well for Rogue. And that was, their style where people are like, oh, they're so predictable. But I want to see the other looks that they try and take, because Rogue should be taking all the chances in this group. As much as it is like, group of death or whatever, if you do well in the group of death, even, taking games off of, you get to claim like, we took the most games off the eventual tournament winner and stuff like that. Can be very real accomplishments for world sets like this. You're always looking at the like, all right, we have nothing to lose. We go all out here. Maybe you can claim fame from, some great games, some great plays. So I'm definitely looking especially at Inspired and Larson together, because I think those 2 have been really good for the team.
I was impressed by Inspired as well, kind of flipping his jungle playstyle in playoffs, like how he did pretty quickly from being mostly tank utility-ish for the regular season into like Hecarim and Eve and stuff, which was, and he played them really well. And so like to your point, it's going to be really hard for them to get out of groups, but they can try and pick up some wins. Larson, like you said, step up. Vander and Hansama as well. 2 pretty experienced players, all things considered. I mean, it doesn't feel like that long ago that we were talking about how good of a young player Hansama was, but that was now a couple of years ago. And so they can also, I think it's tough to say that they're going to be able to beat the bot lanes of like Loken and Lumao, but I actually would love to see. Vander had a great playoffs as well. He made a lot of plays. How you doing, Azael? Nice cats. I miss them. But yeah, like I actually think
Fair.
They got second pro basically every position but Finn. Like so I do think that their bot lane can potentially make some plays as well and make a name for themselves if they're able to make some big plays against Lumao and Beryl, who people have so much respect for.
Yeah, I mean they're going to have to, right? Hans Zomel, does kind of have the pocket Draven. Maybe you're going to try to prep some more things like that. And I had, I think, very little hope for Larson internationally until he showed a lot more of the aggressive looks in playoffs, where he really did step up. I felt a lot. He was fantastic on his Azir and some of these slower picks in the regular season, but I just think that the pace at which some of these teams that they're going to be playing against, that style doesn't usually work as well internationally. So it's something that I think he needed to show that flexibility, and he was able to do it up against Caps, right? Even in the G2 Rogue series, his Akali was fantastic. He played Akali 4 to 5 games. He really popped off in 2 of them. And Caps is obviously an incredibly strong mid laner. One of the best in the world. So it does bode well that he was able to kind of bring out that different style. And my cat Snowflake is really craving some attention here. It doesn't
Is
it food time? Is that what it is? 6:30 is the dinner time or
definitely
breakfast?
not.
So,
there's no chance we're awake anywhere even close to this time. So this is just like
Avali came over to visit the other day, and she brought her dog, and I was super happy. I got to pet the dog for a couple minutes. Travis just got insanely angry that she brought the dog over. It was just like,
you got jealous.
This is why we can't have animals in the house. There's hair everywhere. He's here for 10 minutes. Now the living room's full of hair. Blah, blah, blah. I was like,
what a grouch.
But look at this stuff that's going on.
So since we're having a little pep break, I went on a little vacation to Palm Springs for and just like quarantine there for a little bit. And when I got home, my cats were so affectionate. It's the best feeling when you come home and they are just all over you, like you're the only person in the life to them. I basically am. So it makes sense,
all right. Let's move on now, okay? Let's stop talking about how great it is to have pets.
Sorry.
There are those of us that live with the grumpy man.
All right. Well, I guess we can move on to Group C. Pretty excited for this group. A lot of big favorites. Rogue upset. If they can upset it, it would be pretty exciting. But this one, I think, is going to be an incredibly exciting group.
This is interesting.
LGD likely slotted in. So these are 4 teams that all I think, whether or not they are the favorite in the group, I think all 4 of these teams, it's fair to say, will come into this group thinking that they can get out. Thinking that they have a shot, right? And I think that all 4 of these teams have a legitimate shot to actually get out. I think that most people will peg LGD and Gen G probably as the favorites, but that being said, these are not the flawless teams, from the LCK and from the LPL. LGD, I think, really struggled in their mid and late game. I think that they, showed some pretty dominant performances, and they have some really talented individual players. But that being said, this is not a team that is flawless from a lead. This is a team that can be exploited, that can be punished. They're very reliant on, obviously, Peanut and how he's playing. And Gen G as well, I think, has struggled at times. I think that, the LCK teams below Damwon did not look invulnerable, right? So Fnatic in form, TSM in form, they can take games from these teams. And I think it's going to be a really scrappy group with a lot of potential for there to really be any combination of the 4 getting out.
And it's also like a bunch of teams that had some up and down summer splits as well. It's not even like, there's a bunch of, good representatives. It's also like Fnatic was 9-9 regular season and then, make a pretty crazy winter side run to finals. Whereas TSM is the opposite, where they're also struggling a little bit in the regular season, but then they go, 5 straight best of 5s through the losers bracket to make it. Gen G was, they had a pretty good regular season as well, but then had to go in through regional qualifier where they are the kings of in LCK. So it has been the teams that kind of felt like they had to do it the hard way in a sense, I guess, is what I'm getting at with these teams. They all have a scrappier path.
Yeah, I feel too like Fnatic I just have this feeling that they are going to improve a lot during Worlds, like during this practice for Worlds, during the group stage, during the play-ins, from scrims and from the super server games of solo queue. It just feels like they have a lot of players, namely Bwipo, Hillisang, and Selfmade. I feel like they all are going to flourish in that Chinese solo queue environment. Because Hillisang is roaming all the time, making all these plays. Selfmade is, I think it's really apt that he named himself that with his gamer tag because he's such a confident style jungler, likes to carry himself. And maybe a little arrogant as well, but that'd be a good thing. His Evelyn, there's multiple clips, one-shotting everybody. I think that plays really well into it. And Bwipo always likes to trade so heavily in lane. And Fnatic as an organization have always improved a lot during Worlds, even when week 1 has been terrible for them, and North America's like, woo, week 1, we did great. This year's they're gonna be all roses. Week 2 hits and we are like traumatized by week 2. I honestly feel like it's the opposite for Fnatic, where they're like, oh yeah, week 2, this is where we clutch it out.
Yeah,
we're good.
They win every tiebreaker. So they're always the clutch team in the second week.
We're traumatized. You have to know that like they have the opposite sort of affiliation, with that sort of growth span.
Yeah. It'll be interesting for me. I do think I thought you were going to go a different direction with the self-made thing, because it's like he's the jungler that plays for himself, that's taken all the farm.
That's where I thought he was going.
He's a self-made man. He's going to farm it up.
That is the direction that I'm going.
And he does play a very different style. It's interesting because with Broxa, with Fnatic, he played so much for his lanes. He was always there to like back them up and kind of follow up on these crazy plays that sometimes Hillisang or Bwipo or whoever was actually going for. And I think that worked well for Fnatic. But Selfmade kind of does it in a different way, where he plays to really get jungle advantage, to try to maybe punish invades or get invades going himself to really get ahead and to be this massive force when it comes to time to team fight. So I think it's a very different style. And I think that we have seen some of the kind of bumps in the road for Fnatic adjusting to this. I think that Bwipo has looked a lot worse this year as a result, not having Broxa there to kind of back him up and to be there with him and take those fights with him. You talked about how Bwipo really likes to trade heavily. It's not always to his benefit this year. Sometimes he's kind of going for these crazy plays or crazy picks, and he's trying to, play in a way that I think he has been able to in the past.
No more Zillion. No more Zillion ever, please.
I love it.
Like he has a lot of different picks, right, that are less popular elsewhere. He's like quite a few games of Cho. He's brought out the Urgot.
And Zillion is not one of them that
Zillion.
we ever want to see again.
So I think that he has had some really high highs, but he's had some pretty low lows. He has been somewhat inconsistent, and I think that's actually true of a lot of the Fnatic members.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Hillisang has been very hit or miss. Really in the regular season, it was like just Reckless and Selfmade too. I thought that were pretty consistent. Nemesis was actually, statistically like one of the worst laners in the league during the regular season. He really, I think, stepped it up, and the Lucian pick and everything worked really well for him in playoffs. Like this whole team did a lot better in playoffs, and we know that they can have those high highs. For me, Fnatic could be like first or last in this group, just based on like, what side of the coin they're getting almost, because these guys do play really crazy aggressive. They never back down from fights, and then it comes down to execution. It's like, can you actually take these fights and really come out on top? And I think that they have the ability to do it when they're really on, but when they're off, they can look pretty rough sometimes.
I think it's also worth noting that Reckless being the kind of stabilizing force, like you said, because and the streakiness, because when Hillisang's on, he's actually so nuts.
He's incredible.
Yeah, and that's why I totally agree with the point about first and fourth, and why bot lanes for me in this group is just like insane. It's such a storied group of bot laners, like with Ruler and Doublelift also being down there, and Reckless. Like I'm excited that we actually get Reckless versus Doublelift in the group stage. I actually think it's going to be so interesting to watch, particularly the bot lanes, even though there's a lot of other things going on. Like these are three teams. I guess TSM has switched up more in recent years, but historically Doublelift has been played around. Historically Reckless is being played around, and Ruler is still being played around. He's still the guy for Gen G, who talking about Gen G, I guess a little bit, like, my God, I think Kobe was going here when he started going off about DRX a little earlier, but like, I actually thought that Gen G looked maybe like the actual second best team coming out of Korea.
Yeah. And also I was talking to Atlas a bunch too, and he definitely had those thoughts. Like, Ruler and Life as a bottom lane have been playing so well. This team's super consistent. I feel like they have a lot of options to go with. LCK is pretty stacked for mid laners, but BDD is still one of the best mid laners coming to Worlds. Even though the rest of the LCK mid laners are just like, towering above there because there's so much hype for
Showmaker, and all these guys in the LCK.
But I think that, sometimes if you start to like sweep them back under the rug, then that can be a really poor choice, because BDD and Clid, both extremely good players still, and have proven themselves over the course of this split so many times for Gen G. So I feel like this team is definitely well situated to pull it off, especially with, like, where I was kind of talking about earlier, where they come in as a third seed, and DRX is the second one. So people kind of, you rate that a little bit worse for Gen G coming as a lower number seed, but I think they do hold that extra weight.
Yeah, I mean, this could definitely be a bot diff group for them, right? Like, because not only because Ruler and Life are the best bot lane in the LCK, right? I said that Damwon had every first team except for AD, and that's because Ruler was just absolutely smurfing. Like, his CS differential was something insane. What was it like?
It was like 12, I think, or something.
Yeah, like 12 at 10, 12 at 15, something absurd like that. 13.1 CSD at 15. Like, that is just so insane. Life has really impressed me. He even on some of these picks that aren't always like the flashiest of picks, like the set and things like this, his positioning is so good. He always seems to be able to really ride the line between playing incredibly aggressively and not just like giving away easy kills. He always seems to be able to find the aggressive engage, get in there, tank as much as possible, and he gets out of fights with such low amounts of health. They win these 2v2s so consistently. And it's not just that I think Ruler is the best AD in this group, and potentially the best AD in the entire tournament. It's that, like you said, Mark, they actually play through their bot lane. Whereas, TSM is playing much more around top side. I feel like Selfmade is playing much less for his lanes. Yes, he can gank and can do that style, but generally he plays to get himself ahead. So I do think that, Doublelift and Reckless and these bot lanes are going to be in tough against them. Because that is such a standout area for them. I do think that, if there was a weakness for them, it's like, I think that Rascal hasn't been the greatest and hasn't been like as flexible, I think, as maybe some other top laners in these groups. And that's kind of where you're looking to attack, especially with some of these players. Bwipo has played a lot of these different picks. He's willing to go aggressive and try to take advantageous matchups. We know, talking about TSM a bit, that, in the playoffs, they very clearly moved to, all right, Doublelift, Balfrost, you're sitting in the bot lane on an island, and Bjergsen is going to be able to play something that tries to move out of lane and pair up and really enable Broken Blade. And it became so much about Spica and Bjergsen moving for Broken Blade and enabling him, get him on a split pusher like a Jax or Camille or something like that. And that is an avenue in against someone like Gen G if Rascal isn't playing well. If you can actually capitalize on that, if Gen G want to go towards bot lane and your bot lane can hold up, which is obviously incredibly hard to do against them, admittedly, but there is kind of that split style where you end up having teams playing opposite sides of the map, and it kind of becomes who can get more out of their advantage.
Yeah, I think it's like we were saying, I think DRX will probably come out ahead a lot of the time. I'd probably put them as favorites for the group, even if LGD show up. Gen G was one play away from being in the finals.
You mean Gen G, right?
Excuse me, yeah. If LGD show up, I would still say Gen G is probably the favorite. And they were one play away from making finals. Like, it was this one Baron play where they secured the Baron and maybe should have ran, but tried to like fight in the back of the pit or get a little greedy. And then they 3-0'd in the gauntlet to get here. So I easily think Gen G is maybe dark horse in the tournament. I still think we already hit a lot of the favorites in terms of Damwon and the two top LPL teams. But Gen.G and G2 are some of those teams I'm looking at to also be a little bit of a contender, but they do play a really different style. Like, as great as Life is, he is not playing the Lumao, Barrel, like LPL, other supports running around the map a lot. Like, it is more Clid coming down to bot lane. And so I'm curious how that'll break out, because we still don't exactly know what the world's meta is.
The last thing I'll say, kind of from an NA point of view, is I'm actually pretty excited to see how Bjergsen can perform. It's been a couple of years since we've actually got to see him at an international event. TSM has been very vocal about how they felt like he deserved to get there. He deserved to make Worlds because of how incredibly well he was playing. I think Bjergsen is playing some of the best League of Legends of his entire career. And I think it would be exciting to see if he can have really strong performance against BDD, against Nemesis, against some of these guys in this group, and really kind of have that performance for himself, because from the TSM point of view, both Doublelift and Bjergsen, they're looking for those Worlds performances. Doublelift got a good result at MSI, making it to the finals, but he has still been chasing that Worlds groups performance. Bjergsen as well has been chasing that and has been trying to get back to Worlds now for a couple of years, ever since Doublelift left. So those guys are reunited. There's high expectations for them, and while it is obviously a really hard group, every group is going to be really hard. I think if TSM can play at their best, they can get out. If Fnatic can play at their best, they can get out for sure. And that's why I think this is such an exciting group, really, to see, where you have like 4 teams that could potentially really make it.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to Group D then. Let's throw up the last one. This one was also a pretty difficult group. I think that Top Esports actually have a pretty easy time. I know a decent amount of people are already saying, oh yeah, they could possibly even 6-0 it because of DRX's draft issues and the lack of reliability that I jumped into too early in the previous group discussion there. This one is kind of like, FlyQuest, good luck. This is definitely going to be a super rough group for you, but good luck here. I'd have to say
it's the rogue treatment for FlyQuest for sure.
Not quite as bad, but bad enough.
Yeah. I will say that for DRX, early on, I was like super hyped up on Keria and Deft bottom lane. I know that Deft had back problems, and they also, their bottom lane started slumping a little bit. So I'm curious to see if his back is feeling better, if they start to play better, and how that affects the team overall, because they could come in being more scary than people have been giving them credit to if their bottom lane, returns to that level that we saw them play at already, in the beginning of the season. And that could make it even more scary than it is for FlyQuest.
Yeah, I mean, Chovy is an absolute monster. Best LCK mid, I think most people would say pretty easily.
Ooh, best?
Him or Showmaker, right?
Showmaker?
Him or Showmaker. But this is one of those things where it's like you start evaluating teammates and their level of performance, like you're saying. I definitely think Pyosik and Doran are not the same as Canyon and Naguri. So I think Chovy had a lot of I felt like watching the playoffs, a lot of hard carry performances, and even then had some good laning phases against Showmaker as well. So it's close. I shouldn't have said easily, but I still lean towards Chovy personally. And then, like you're saying with Deft, if he actually can get on form, he's historically one of the best AD carries in the world, historically, and so they should have the tools to become a huge threat. They're still even right now we're talking about some of these inconsistencies and some of the draft problems and stuff. They're still really good. I don't want to undersell that they are still huge threats in this group, and probably this is the second seed. But when you start comparing it to top, it starts looking pretty tough.
Yeah, I mean, top is so insane. They're really an incredible team to watch. Knight is like one of the only guys in the LPL to have won multiple MVPs now, and guess who else has done it? Rookie and Dombey. So what have those guys done? They won Worlds, right? And it's one of those things where you're like, well, yeah, okay, you're pretty damn good. The surrounding cast, I think, is pretty incredible. Knight being able to have Karsa come in, and play so heavily for the lanes, be able to sacrifice for these lanes to get them ahead, to really play around them, enable them in a way, I think that's pretty incredible. He's such a standout player individually. Like even just looking at his Syndra, it's been pretty incredible. Like throughout this year, he has 20 Syndra games, 90% win rate. He is getting chain banned out on this. It's like 80% of the bans almost against top are Syndra. Anytime he gets it, he just wins. And that's not even to talk about like I think he is amazing, but I think that it's not just about the individuals on top. It's about how well they play together, right? And how committed they can be to an overall strategy to play out a game. One of the things that really caught my eye with them is not only is 369, willing and able to counterpick you and play these skill-based matchups and crush you with them, the entire team then immediately and seamlessly seems to just like transition into playing through top lane, right? And games like Mordekaiser gets blind picked. All right, well he's locking in the Jax, and Karsa is ghosting his lane the whole time. And anytime the lane needs to be reset, he's there to help push it in. And Knight's not even going to TP back to lane ever because he's going to save it to counter gank top. And and then you blind pick Renekton. All right, well he's in there with the Quinn, and you're getting slammed by that too. And it's like, the way that they play around top lane for 369, I think is so incredible. And I think it's the team that is the best in the world at actually doing that and enabling their team to do it. Jackie Love obviously already, has had incredible international success. He's a champion, and the team doesn't need to play through him. They are very much, I think, kind of this bot lane that's left on an island oftentimes, him and Yuyenja. But they have been so good at withstanding pressure, in what can be difficult matchups and difficult situations where they're getting a lot of jungle pressure, and they always show up in the team fights.
Yeah, and they even play super aggressively, even if they don't have their jungler there. And Jackie Love is just popping off. The few games that I have seen TES lose have been some where like the enemy's just trying to camp bottom lane, camp Jackie Love, and you see like even some tilted plays start to come out of him because this team still plays just so aggressively on so many fronts. And I had Karsa up here tied with Kanavi. I was going back and forth for which one I feel like is best jungler at the entire tournament. Karsa just does so much for his lanes. This guy, I have never seen a jungler push a laner's wave for them so frequently. It's like he will never let Knight or 369 sit with a bad lane state. Like he will get his ass out there. He'll come, gank your lane and then immediately help AoE everything and be like, all right, you're coming to crab with me. Like I feel like they're just so good. Azael's talking about how they play as a team, linking up in ways like this where if you're in solo queue and stuff and like you're a jungler and you touch a minion in somebody's lane, they're like, hey, get off my experience and go off my minion. Right? But it's actually
showing up for a gank, smiting my cannon. He's the opposite of that.
It's so beneficial to the team where they call Karsa over like, oh, okay, I really need, we have to push this wave now. I can get off a back right now. I have a really good buy timing. I can get, X item so to get back out here. Or, I can come with you then to get Scuttle Crab priority or any of these matchups you're also talking about that hinge really heavily on carry performances and on kill pressure. And it just feels like Karsa does so much for his lanes, not letting the minion waves ever get into bad spots and being there when the team needs him there. Plus focusing a lot on objectives. I just feel like he does a lot. I know during the regular season it wasn't as great, but I think he also ramped up in playoffs. So I think he's coming into Worlds pretty strong.
Yeah, I was gonna say him and Kanavi are also like the two polar opposites in terms of play styles for their team. Also in draft, like Karsa's often taking the more tanky, sets and those kinds of things. Played a lot of Trundle in the regular season to help try and, be the front line for his team when you have all these crazy counter picks coming in top and you're, mid. He does play. He's not playing tank mids or anything like that. And so like. He does fulfill that role, and he's such a team player. You talk about going those lanes and taxing them. He was still, I believe, the lowest CSD difference, at 10 junglers in the LPL because he's often just like playing for the team. He's not like those lane taxing, ooh, I'm getting myself ahead going to your lane. Like it's definitely not that style. It's like you said about setting up for objectives and things. And TS is basically, this triple threat comp are a team that it feels like there's always one of these coming from the LPL where all 3 lanes can hard carry, and you have 2 of the best players in the world, Knight and Jackie Love, arguably best in their positions as well as topping a lot of just the overall list with Knight. Like, there's such a stacked lineup. I think everyone's looking at them as the favorites for Worlds. I don't think I've seen anyone. I mean, Damwon and JDG are in that conversation, but I think everyone's still putting top on as number 1.
Yeah, I mean, they honestly seem like IG levels of talent, but more consistent, which is just terrifying. You're like, well, how do you win? And the answer is you usually don't. So top heavy favorite, obviously going up against DRX. You guys talked about Chovy. I think one of the strengths for him is his flexibility. And I think it will be that's such an exciting matchup. Power of Evil also going to get his chance to go up against 2 of the very best mid laners, in the world. And Power of Evil has been performing well. I think, has had some flexibility himself. I think FlyQuest is like so on an outside chance here. This is, incredibly hard for them to really be able to take down either of these teams. But I do hope that FlyQuest coming into this group will go in with some really intelligent plans. Some of the strengths that they did have in the LCS is level 1 game plans, is picks that, into specific strategies such as the Swain into Galio and things like this. And I think that, if there is a chance for FlyQuest to really, try to make something happen in this group, it has to be preying on draft tendencies from these teams. It has to be coming up with unique strategies and, champion picks that are going to be able to punish not only in lane what the team is trying to do, but what their entire strategy is going to be based around. And I think that is where FlyQuest really has to look to try to outthink their opponents, to try to get, level 1 advantages off of invades and, clever warding and things like this, and to try to really get edges there, because, Santorin is such a cerebral player. He is incredibly intelligent. And, that's maybe kind of like where they could make something happen, because as far as like pound for pound talent, it's going to be ridiculously hard, right? Like, these teams are just so stacked.
Yeah, and top will scrap you level 1. So if you ever have a smart level 1, you're like, you can maybe get a lead there. I think coin flipping some really early game plays, they're not a team that's going to back down from that.
We could also tack on a little bit of Mad if you want, because Mad's probably the one getting into there. They're in a similar boat to FlyQuest, where you're going to be kind of fighting for scraps at the bottom, looking to try and take games off of DRX and top esports. But again, I feel like the teams that are going to be able to especially get the games off DRX, that I expect them to lose some of these group stage games, could end up making the fight for second interesting in this group. It's a possibility, because I think top esports is for sure going to get out for number 1 for me. Mm-hmm. And then it can happen for some of these, especially if Azael's talking about the level 1s and the drafts and stuff coming in intelligently, prepping for some of these.
Yeah, I mean that's your hope, right? Like, because I don't think you can as like Mad or FlyQuest, I don't think you really stand much of a chance if you're just like, yeah, we'll just go in and play standard.
And I think also, like we were kind of saying about Group B and, making a name for yourself and trying to make some plays and stuff, like that's definitely something that you both can aim for. I think mid laners in this group is actually really interesting. Humanoid kind of being the veteran for Mad, and seeing him go up against Chovy and Knight will be pretty crazy. And then the fact that there's so many, rookies and young players on Mad that have had such a great first year, like, can Shadow continue to pop off? I mean, he can be a little hit or miss. He's a little streaky, but like when he hits, it's insane. And like, can you hit against DRX? Can you hit against top? Because that would, be super, super impressive. And I want to see more of that out of them. Kaiser as well has had a pretty good year. And like, what can you get done against a tournament favorite and an exceptionally strong team in DRX?
And sometimes I will say, based on talking to some of the players and the coaches and even some of the interviews that the LPL and LCK teams do, they don't prep as much for some teams that they don't expect to be able to be, like at their level, right? Top and DRX are going to prep a lot for each other. I don't know how much they're going to prep for FlyQuest and potentially, Mad, right? And that does give you an in sometimes to be able to pull off things that they aren't necessarily expecting. They may not be able to realize, how good someone like Shadow is on Lee Sin or things like this, that you can maybe try to get a slight edge there. Because it is funny at times seeing, I've seen some interviews from some of these top players and like they don't even know the names of the people that they're playing against and stuff. And it's like, you didn't watch any VODs, did you?
All right, let's get into the dive questions then. First, we'll start with the Twitter ones here. Jason loves LCS, sends in a decent amount of questions. He says, hey, #dive, I would love to hear about your favorite North American team runs at Worlds. Great upset games, individual plays. What's gotten you most hyped?
Who wants Cloud9 2018?
Everyone.
Yeah, that's for sure the one, right? It's our best placement at Worlds. It was a crazy year too, because that was the year that finally broke the cast of like the LCK style, and LCK getting trounced like that had to question themselves and question their whole reality and how they played the game, and it led to this big revolution. So it was big for a lot of regions around the world, but especially for us and Cloud9 getting to semifinals.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that one was so exciting, because it really redefined the meta in League of Legends. Prior to that, it wasn't just about LCK. It was like, okay, how does SKT play the game? That's how you're supposed to play the game. Everyone copied that, right? And, G2 came in and these LPL teams came in and Cloud9 even, really stepping up and playing aggressive in a way that, changed the game and changed how people looked at the game. And we, are still kind of, feeling the waves of that. A couple years later, seeing how good LPL is and seeing how it's now some of the LCK teams trying to adapt to the LPL style and trying to play, more aggressively and less of that kind of slow macro style.
Is there another run that we should hit? I mean, it's basically C9.
I think it would come down to like individual plays or games that you remember, like a super hype comeback or a game episode. The other thing that pops into my mind initially as I lean out of the shot it was when CLG were at Worlds and who he was playing Aurelion Sol.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
And blasted, was it Gorilla and Prey or something?
I think it was Rocks. So
was it?
Yeah, I think it was either Just Prey or both of them, but his Aurelion still got to pop off, and it's cool to see anytime you have players with champions that they're so closely associated to that just other people just do not play, and then for them to pop off against such a good team too. I think that one for me was really memorable.
All right, we got another question here. This one comes from No Seriously. It says, if you could craft a fourth NA team for Worlds with all of the remaining players not going, assuming enough time to train practice together but following import rules, what would your team be?
All right, let's start top. I go Someday. That's one import slot.
Someday over Licorice?
Yeah. Jungler. Wait, I'll let you guys contest top. Do you want to contest top?
I think.
Go ahead.
I was just the only reason I potentially say Licorice because he is really, really, really good and
resident.
He's a resident, so you might have a little bit more flexibility when you start getting into your mid lane position. Because I'm not sure, you want to get pinched, so to speak, so early.
True. I was thinking maybe DeMonte if we needed to have a resident mid laner.
Yeah, he would be the choice.
But then I was also thinking Golden Guardians bottom lane.
Right.
That's a lot of Golden Guardians.
FBI, and then I wasn't sure about mid.
Yeah.
You should go Niski, but
it's hard, man. I mean, I think it just depends. Like, what do you? If you're just assuming everyone like gels perfectly and you're just kind of looking at individual talent, then I think it's like more of a question. But it's so hard to know how people would work together.
And since it's too hard to know, then don't take that into account.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would honestly, if you're gonna have a fourth team, I would be happy to see Cloud9 go. Obviously, they were that fourth place team. And, I'll just kind of take that angle simply because, we have seen that they are, a team in an org that is pretty good at adapting at Worlds. They're the one team that has been, done a fair bit internationally for NA. So I think that could be pretty cool. But I mean, if I was to swap players out, based on like most recent performance, yeah, I mean, maybe looking at Golden Guardians bottom lane, maybe looking at Someday. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. Like, I know a lot of people are really hot on Closer. Maybe Closer, you could kind of look at, like, if you're trying to cobble something together a bit, you could look at like maybe Someday or Licorice top lane, Closer jungle. You could have, FBI bot lane. You probably have to pair him with Licorice if you want to do like Closer and FBI. That would be your two imports, right? So then it would have to be like Demonte and Vulcan or something like that. That could be pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Our anchor question. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No.
Our anchor question then from Weston Smith. Opinions on double elimination format.
Hey guys, my name is Weston Smith. Big fan of the show, but an even bigger fan of FlyQuest. And as a Fly fan, I can't help but feel like we got somewhat gypped by the double elimination format, especially with such a close final series. It feels unfair that we got no reward for staying in the upper bracket the entire time, but also it feels like TSM got a better chance to read the meta because of the extra games that they got to play in the lower bracket. And I guess it just feels like in some ways the upper bracket teams in both EU and NA were punished for winning. So is this a valid way of thinking about things? And would you guys like to see this format again next year, or do you think it's unfair?
I personally don't think it's unfair. Like, your advantages come earlier on. Like, you have a protection to lose once, and then you don't have to play as many games. Arguably, you get to watch what the other team is doing and prepare. It's not a huge turnaround time when it takes place, the day before, and you're prepping for two teams, like, what FlyQuest is going through. But it's one of those things where it's like, well, just win the best of 5. I don't personally like a lot of those excuses. It's not even excuses, but like, oh, we got screwed because we won and then had to do these things and then yada yada yada. And it's always balancing about the practical side. Like, if you could make a perfectly fair thing, of course I'd prefer it to be perfectly fair. But do you want to seed one game and make it so you start a best of 5 up 1 for FlyQuest? That doesn't really feel good as a viewer. No, you can't do a whole bracket reset and play 10 games on a single day. That's just not feasible. You start getting into all those kinds of issues. Win the finals is kind of like just.
I do think they should have gotten their side selection.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh yeah, that's whack.
Yeah, and I'm sure I know that I'm pretty sure they're changing the rules to guarantee that for the future with whatever other changes go on. But side selection plus your opponents having to play the previous best of 5 so quick before the finals, I think that should theoretically be an advantage as well. To see more of their play and for you to be able to, scrim and focus on yourself more.
Yeah,
I agree. I like the format overall. Honestly, like I think that there's no absolutely perfect playoff format, but this I will say was I think the best one we've done by a lot. I think that it added the most excitement to the games. I love that we had no gauntlet. I think that was really hype. Just having worlds be decided in the playoffs and stuff. So, hopefully there's some tweaks we can make to improve it here and there, but overall was really happy with it. And that should do it for our live Worlds Draw Show edition of The Dive. Again, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, as well as all your major podcast platforms. Tune in as League of Legends World Championship kicks off in Shanghai on September 25th. We will see you then. We're going to go to bed.
Staying up forever.